So just to be clear, this is real. You have actually started changing your life.
I demoted the gentleman I was living with to a housemate. And I'm now going and moving to Florida, and I'm going to open a clinic. I'm going to open a...
Have you said this publicly? I've missed this.
I have. It was in the New York Post a couple of weeks ago, but people are too scared to talk about it.
Unlike a lot of gay people or people with these tendencies who go into reparative therapy or who try to change their lives, a lot of them are people who have had very unsatisfactory sex lives because they've been held back by feelings of, inadequacy or shame, or they've been, overweight and not got the sex partners they wanted. I've been very handsome and very desirable my whole life, so I've never had a problem finding... I'm just trying to tell you my story.
Why don't you just make it like straight lessons? You guys can like instruct me in the ways.
I have some work to do on my mannerisms, that my lifestyle at least is now becoming more congruent with God and with my faith and all the rest of it. And I have now achieved something that I thought was impossible. I've become a straight white male.
If I wasn't committed, I wouldn't be in polyester for a start.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be drinking Beck's.
He is drinking a Beck.
You do look like you're dressed as a straight guy for Halloween. He's like, I need a Ford hat, a Tommy Hilfiger shirt.
Get some glue on chest hair.
I took the jewelry off. I got one cross. I'm doing the best I can.
You're not even Jewish anymore.
I grew out my hillbilly hair. I'm actually doing something quite revolutionary and difficult, which is I'm trying to like re-virginize myself. So yesterday I did some Star Wars Lego.
Oh no!
You're gonna need a lot of Legos, Milo.
I've never had a problem finding sexual partners, and I've had lots of them, and it's interfaced with other addictions and compulsions and dependencies and diversions in my life.
So I guess this brings up a question. Do you ever foresee yourself finding a wife and having a family?
It's asking a lot.
Well, sure.
I know people who were where I am now, who were here 20 years ago, and who now have children and a wife and are very happy, which is very inspirational to me. But for want of a better expression, they weren't quite such enthusiastic homosexuals to begin with. As to whether you will see a beautiful Latina and lots of little Latin Yiannopoulos, by my side at an awards ceremony in 20 years, who knows? But I certainly hope so. I'll be honest with you right now, the prospect is not exciting to me, physically or otherwise.
It needn't be. And look, I just want to be clear that it really makes no difference. You're open to what God's plan is for you, and as He heals you, as He heals all of us, we change and our affections change.
One of the ways you know that gay is a choice is, and you're not born this way, is there are some factors that are fairly reliable indicators of whether somebody will end up being gay.
Okay.
Absent fathers and overbearing mothers are a really reliable indicator someone's going to be gay, which
What about,
I
like,
think
my father
explains
was
why there are
absent?
so many...
You think that's part of the recipe?
Yeah, so which explains why there are so many black and Jewish homosexuals, right? Absent fathers and overbearing mothers.
I had absent father. Mother was not overbearing, though.
There you go.
I had absent
My
father.
mom was young. My mom was very young.
Also,
That's why you're half gay.
So you
Jay.
got the hair color, but not the full dick sucking.
Yes.
Was my father absent? He was murdered. He was stabbed to death. That's not like he absent. It's not like they marked him absent.
Okay,
that
it's an
day.
excused
I mean-
absence, but still.
It's not illegal to offer electroshock therapy, so we'll just call it the Pence pathway, and we'll, I'm being silly, but my aspiration is to start with one place in Florida where people can come for residential treatment. I'm not a clinician, obviously. I'm going through this journey myself. But one of the things I can do is help put money together with expertise, together with a bit of PR and, whatever, and mix it all together, and normally things turn out well. And my goal with it would be to make something a little bit, I guess, like Planned Parenthood, in the sense that not selling baby parts, obviously, but in the sense that we'll do some clinical work, but we'll also publish some research, and we'll also do lots of public relations. And I can build an auditorium and give speeches again at last. lesbian is not a thing. There are no lesbians. I mean, women have very malleable sexualities, and occasionally a woman will. There's probably like 5 people who are actual real lesbians. Probably Tammy Bruce and Camille Parley, and they're the only ones. But every other woman is kind of wandering backwards and forwards between men and women in their life, and everybody who knows a lesbian knows that's true. The nature of female sexuality is completely different.
Okay,
to
I
male
mean, I didn't mean to
sexuality.
go down that rabbit trail. I'm just making a larger point that narrative of someone switching and becoming
but I'm saying it's
straight,
important because it's
you
different.
never hear about it.
No, sure, but it's different, right? You would expect a woman to go backwards and forwards, and they all do. But male homosexuality seems to be a bit more sticky, right? When a man gets stuck into these habits, these behaviors, he tends not to come back out of it again, on the whole. So on those rare occasions, you're right, of course, yes, the media covers all this stuff up, doesn't fit the narrative, we know that. On the rare occasion that a man flips back or aims to get themselves out of a sinful and self-destructive way of life, that's something we really ought to celebrate and see. I'm not bothered that whether people talk about lesbians going backwards and forwards, because they do that their whole life. It's not news. It's not news when any of them do it. But it is news when a man does it. And we ought to make as much of an effort as we can to fight the enforced, the omerta of the mainstream media when it comes to men who are seeking to find their way out of this lifestyle. Because when a man does it, it's a big deal, and it doesn't happen very often. I wish it did, and I hope to be part of making it happen more often.
The reason you're able to do what you do, specifically this idea of opening up this clinic in Florida, is because you have courage. And that is what is lacking in the leadership class, certainly in corporate leadership, but also in political leadership. Apart from Trump and a handful of people, there is no willingness to go against whatever cultural norms were invented 5 minutes ago.
I don't perceive it that way in myself. I've always been aware that I had a responsibility because I had certain gifts to serve if I can.
You're also humble, which is good.
Well, yeah.
Now that you're not Jewish or gay, I feel like you are just a Nazi.
When did I
and
stop
I don't know how I feel about that.
As a general rule in this life, if you have a friend, if you have a colleague, if you have a coworker, if you just met someone on the internet the other day for the first time, and they tell you that they're gay, don't question it. Don't talk back. Don't ask for their credentials. Don't ask them to prove it to you that they're gay. Just warmly accept it and proceed to treat them as gay. And you know what? If you go and you scroll down their timeline, if you go and you check their Instagram and you go and you check their Facebook, you might find evidence of some members of the opposite sex they used to be involved with. If it's a gay man, you might find they used to date a straight woman. You might say, hey, I'm friends with that ex-girlfriend of yours. And if it's a lesbian, there might be some men in their past. There might even be some people of the opposite sex they've had sex with this week, and it's still on their Twitter timeline, or it's still on their Instagram, or, you within 6 degrees separation. There may be strange and contradictory things about their claims to being gay or their claims to being straight. And you know what? You should just do them the courtesy. You should just extend to them the privilege. If they say that they're gay, you're not going to question it. You're going to treat it as a solid fact. 99.9% of the time, it's easy to live by this principle. And once in a long while, it's not so easy. It's a bit of a challenge. I had an interview a few months ago with a YouTuber called Frank Tufano. We talked about his crazy beliefs about politics and science, and he doesn't believe in the theory of evolution. It was an interesting clash of civilizations, this interview I had with him. And one of the things you're going to find out about Frank Tufano, if you put his name into Google, is that he says he's straight. And a lot of people on the internet say that he's gay. And a lot of people ridicule him for that and insult him. And they say they have the photographs to prove it, or they have videotape to prove it. I did not insult him that way even once. I didn't ask him one question with the slightest double entendre in it. He chooses to say that he's straight, I'm aware that there is evidence on the internet of him having past sexual relations with men, all right? And I treated him completely warmly and completely sincerely as a straight man. We talked a little bit about some of the women he had a crush on and some aspects of his romantic life, such as they came up in the conversation in that interview. I was not going to insult him by cross-examining his claims to being straight. I was not going to confront him with the fact that other people try to humiliate him by pointing out the extent to which he has a history of being bisexual or gay. Okay, so 99% of the time, it's real easy to live by this principle. The truth is, there are people out there who don't know yet if they are straight or if they're gay, and you have to treat them with courtesy at every single stage of that process. You cannot act as if you know better than they do, even if you do. Sometimes you might have it figured out before they do, and you know what? It's not your place. It's not your place to help. It's not your place to preempt their process of self-discovery. Most of the time, easy to live by. If you've known a lot of feminists, if you've known a lot of women who are part of women's rights movements in any English-speaking culture in the Western world, you will have known some women, who were heterosexual and got caught up in the intellectual and political climate of a woman's feminist movement, and they started to think maybe they were gay. They started to think, hey, this is great. They suddenly have a whole new circle of friends. They joined this movement with a mix of aspirations to make the world a better place, maybe to engage in some kind of hard-hitting critique or analysis of what's wrong with Western civilization or capitalism or patriarchy or what have you. And maybe, just maybe, sometimes some of these heterosexual women have had bad experiences with men in the past, and they're interested in analyzing that. And maybe there's a little bit of a sense of wanting revenge against an ex-boyfriend or an ex-husband or their own father or grandfather or whatever their story. Sometimes, not all the time, okay? And up to a certain point, they think, hey, maybe I can make this work. There are now these women around me who are variously lesbian and bisexual, and I like them and they like me, and at some point they hit a wall where they realize, no. Being colleagues, being political comrades, being intellectual equals and friends, and all the conviviality and cooperation, that's wonderful, that's great, but there's something innate and intrinsic that differentiates them from me that you just can't fake. One of the most interesting aspects of this is hearing it from the other side. If you hear it from the women who are gay, the women who are lesbian or really are bisexual, when they make the effort of kind of bringing in a heterosexual woman to the community, maybe the heterosexual woman doesn't say she's hetero, maybe she says she's bisexual or lesbian or is curious or is wanting to try, and then how they feel, because a lot of the time they were optimistic, like, oh great, they've got this new colleague, they've got this new friend, and maybe it's going to be romantic, and maybe it's going to be a girlfriend, and then they put themselves in that situation where they hit that wall and realize, no, all my optimism was misplaced. I was overlooking or ignoring the extent to which this person isn't just different from me. But they will never really be able to sympathize. They will never really be able to understand what life is like for us, that there's actually an unbridgeable gap. There's a kind of alienation there. There's a limit even to how far empathy can go. Now, in our culture, you pretty much never hear about a heterosexual young man who just gets so interested in being a hairdresser or involved in musical theater or modern dance or the fashion industry that he starts to think that he's gay. Almost never, right? But that really just reflects the depth of homophobia in our society. The fact that it's a much higher hurdle to go over, that the inhibition is much greater. If you're living in a culture that is more accepting of male homosexuality, like Thailand, or have you heard of Thailand? There aren't that many cultures around the world that are accepting of homosexuality. But if it's Thailand, yeah, there are going to be men who have a parallel process of figuring out that they're straight, partly because they tried to be gay in some kind of subculture, if not in a macro culture, that's really kind of warm and encouraging, where they happen to be surrounded by friends, all of whom are gay, blah, 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 parallel path. Admittedly, none of these things apply to Milo Yiannopoulos. Milo Yiannopoulos is not a heterosexual man who started living within a gay subculture that was so warm and so accepting that he started to think that he also might be gay. Milo Yiannopoulos really is not even ex-gay. His ideological position is to claim that homosexuality as such does not exist. And he then wants to argue that the people who think that they're homosexual in fact have a kind of illness, and he is now going to collect millions of dollars to open a clinic because he claims this is an illness he can help to cure. All right? In confronting the ex-gay movement, in confronting the gay reparative therapy movement, or gender realignment, or whatever you want to call it here, in confronting this approach that many fundamentalist Christians now try to make money out of, to be blunt, it's very easy to leap to the question of efficacy. It's very easy to jump to the stage of argument of insisting and saying, but it doesn't work, it can't work, it never works, all right? And what you're skipping over, it's the most important part, philosophically, politically, personally, and in every other way, which is, guess what, guys? Even if it does work, it's the wrong solution to your problem. That's my position. This kind of therapy he's talking about, none of us can say. None of us are in a position to say ever that it doesn't work. And it's because of that first principle I introduced you. If I had a friend who said much more sincerely than Milo is doing that he tried being gay for a few years and he didn't like it, it didn't work out for him, so now he's going to try to be straight and get a wife and kid. And let's just say there's no religious baggage and there's nothing else involved. Okay, what position do you think I'm in? And again, it doesn't matter if there are Instagram photographs on the internet. It doesn't matter if this guy had an OnlyFans or an account on a porn website and was uploading videos of himself engaged in gay sex act. There is no evidence, there is no arbiter, there is no judge but he himself. If he has chosen really sincerely in his own mind, if he has decided that he's fed up with being gay and he's going to try to be straight, right? Who am I, who are any of us to say, no, you're wrong, I veto your decision? Like, my judgment is better than yours about your sexuality. None of us are, all right? Like I said, 99.9% of the time, it's easy to live by that principle. Once in a while, okay? And some of you in the audience will have been in this kind of situation with a friend or a colleague or a relative, someone who decides to be ex-gay, and most likely it will be because of religious guilt, or, you know, they feel they had an epiphany, or some kind of bizarre sense of supernatural quest. But regardless, think of the position you're in. You're not in a position to say to them, no, you're not. You don't feel that way. You're not trying. Sadly, you are in the position of having to step back and say, hey, this ultimately is about your journey of self-discovery. And I'm out here in the cheap seats. I'm out here, I'm a distant spectator. I'm never going to know how you feel. I'm never going to know what you desire. When you sit down with a catalog, a clothing catalog, and you're leafing through that, are you once in a while turned on by the photographs of the guys or the girls, or is it both? All right. That I can't read your mind. And you know what? even if I can read your mind, because you might have some real close friends with, no, Brad. I've sat next to Brad when we were flipping through that clothes catalog, and I was looking at the clothes, and Brad was looking at the dudes. I could tell, right? You might feel that you know Brad better than Brad knows. You might feel certain, and it's still not your place. It's still not appropriate. You got to live by that principle where you let him decide, you let him discover it for himself. Okay? Ultimately, you can change your behavior. A straight woman can choose to live as if she's a lesbian. A straight man behaviorally can choose to live as if he's gay, and vice versa, right? The problem is precisely that we're talking about something that's deeper, that's more fundamental, that's more profound than behavior. We're talking about something that's part of the desire that comes before that behavior, right? On the level of instinct, something as raw and immediate and irrational as how you respond to the sight of a spider crawling on a wall or a snake winding its way through the grass in that first split second before you've even had time to think through the word snake or spider. On that level of instinct, are you gay and are you straight? And then once you have those feelings, what are you going to do with them? The tragedy of Milo Yiannopoulos is not that his crazy reparative therapy can't work. It's that it's the wrong solution to the wrong problem. Okay? Because Milo is not looking for someone to show him how he can have a wife and a child and live as a heterosexual man. He's looking for someone to show him the way to God. He's looking for someone to show him the way to a meaningful life and to a kind of afterlife, a kind of absolution, a kind of immortality, a kind of moral certainty that I stopped believing in maybe when I was 4 years old, right? He wants something that is as self-contradictory and impossible to have and unattainable as a square circle, as hot ice. And to get it, he's going to convince himself. He's going to need to believe that he's heterosexual. For a gay man to believe that he's straight is much easier than living in a godless world and believing that it's the creation of God. The only cure for Milo Yiannopoulos is atheism. The only way out of the cage he's built for himself. It's not for him to rediscover that he's gay. It's not for him to start believing again that being a homosexual is a biologically normal thing, homosexuals should have rights, that it's not a sickness, etc., etc. The way out of the cage is for him to believe in nothing at all. Maybe we can practice doing the puppet show together.
Yes, that's all I needed. I need it all.